One thing I've discovered since giving up the run challenge is how much I needed it in my life to give me my daily shower. And I have neglected some certain healthcare routines in cleanliness because I have had too many days now where I've not done any physical exercise at all while I've had this enforced break. I even counted recently, last week, I think I went 3 days without a shower.
Okay.
Which is my longest streak of not showering since.
We can beat that. I'm sure we can. We're going to go 4 days next week. I can see it now. It's fine. 3 days doesn't sound too bad though.
It felt a bit icky. I think I didn't. It's because I've not realised it. And I've just been on my own, doing my own thing. And then
that's like, a different matter when you're like, oh, I didn't realise it.
Yeah.
What was it? Just like, bit of Lynx Africa, off you go.
I didn't smell bad.
Oh yeah,
but that's because I wasn't doing it well.
Yeah, who was going to tell you that, hey?
No one was around to verify that claim. Welcome, Benny P, to the podcast. Perhaps, and we will see how this goes, but perhaps a regular reoccurring guest. Something a bit different, which marks maybe a new era, a new direction of the podcast, and having something else in the arsenal of episodes, I think, which can help take a lighter view on life, but also maybe go deep and talk about things that interest us.
Yeah, I look forward to it. I'm quite excited, Tom. I want to sort of hear a little bit more about your life as much as anything else here. So yeah, I'm keen to crack on and see what we can get from this.
Before we get started, we should need to kind of address the big topic, which is what we call this series, which we're still yet not confirmed or even discussed.
We haven't even, we messaged briefly about this, hoping that one of us would have an epiphany at a great moment and that we would actually all of a sudden come up with a great name. So we're going to need to think about this.
I don't think it needs to be set in stone now. And also we need to kind of do the recording first to find out, what it is going to be, and what that will become, might come to us in time.
Yeah, I like that. Like an organic thing, maybe it will grow and then we will all of a sudden figure it out. I like this.
Or maybe people listening can help suggest things. Or perhaps there'll be some inner joke which comes out in the next hour or two, which might then just determine what we need to call this. Perhaps we need to wait for a few more episodes, but we'll see. Let's just get this one first.
Okay.
Let's talk about you, Benny P. And who are you?
That is a very good question to begin with. Where would you like me to start on this? I feel the easiest way that people would probably may have heard of me or know of me is through my running. So I would start off as that being one of my characteristics and traits is that I am a runner predominantly. So as many of your previous guests on the podcast will also know, I was with Midnight Runners for a long time, as you well know, being a Midnight Runner, and I was one of their crew captains. So that was a big thing for me. I'm also a former ambassador for Under Armour, and I am now currently the owner of a lovely little coffee van and coffee business called Trailside Coffee, and I operate out of the back of my sweet little vintage van called Renee. So that is, in a nutshell, that is me and what I do.
We're going to come to Renee and talk about your coffee business soon. Let's go back to the running aspect of you. You say you're a runner, and a lot of people listening are runners, but you are a very fast runner.
I mean, I wouldn't describe myself as fast. I would describe myself as a committed runner in that respect. I think I always have been a runner. I'm not one of those people that discovered it during lockdown or came to a sudden realization that running was actually really good for me. I've loved running since I was a child. And also from that as well, I think it's an important thing to differentiate between the fact that I am a runner, but I also love running and athletics itself. So from that sort of thing, I've always been a big fan. And so, yeah, I do a lot of running, multi-event distances. I'm happy to run anything from a mile all the way up to ultra marathons. And earlier this year did the London Marathon, which was one of those absolute tick box moments where I've applied a million times through the ballot, never managed to get in. Finally entered on a good for age, and it was like the most incredible experience that I've had, knowing full well that it would be an incredible experience, but just the support that you get out there was as I'm sure you're aware and many people know, is absolutely incredible. So yeah, I'm fully immersed in all aspects of the running. I'm a geek for it. I love everything from, like I said, the shorter stuff all the way through to doing marathons and ultras. So that's just me through and through.
Your good for age time was?
So to enter, I managed a 2:42, but then at London, I squeezed under the 2:40 with a 2:39. So that will hopefully qualify me next year for the championship entry. So you get the joys of starting a little bit further back than all the super fast elite people. So you get to be in that kind of secondish wave. Yeah, that's something that was always on the cards for me last year, that I wanted to qualify for London just off of that. So provided that the qualifying standards and timings haven't changed, I will be, hopefully, fingers crossed, lining up next year in that sort of secondary wave. So
when do you find that out?
I think you find out, you apply for it in December, I believe, November, December. This is something which I will have to check and be a bit better at. But from what I gather, you apply for it then and you will know fairly quickly whether or not you're in. Well, if you have the time, you're in, basically. So I'm just hoping they haven't changed the time. I don't think they have.
But regardless of getting the championship place, you'll get a good for age place again. That's guaranteed.
The good for age you're supposed to have already applied for, and I didn't apply for it because I assumed that I have a championship entry time. But if they obviously decide that they're going to knock 1 minute off the championship entry time, I'll be very annoyed by that. So yeah, but I managed to get that this year and I was absolutely over the moon. It was up there as like one of my goals. So I was very happy about that.
So a sub 2:40 marathon is who you are as a runner.
Yes.
How have you got there over the years?
Yeah, the cold statistics would tell me.
What is your secret? What is your key recipe?
That is a good question. I think for me, so I'm 34 years old, going on 35. I've been running since I was, like I said, about 12, 13 years old. And in nowhere during that have I fallen out of love with running. I think that's one of the key things, is never to fall out of love with it. I think you can fall out of just enjoying it, or shall we say, you need to take a break from it. But I've never I felt that's what I felt, that you take a break, but I've never fallen out of love with running. If I wasn't doing marathon times or if I wasn't chasing times, I would still be getting out the door and going running. It has, as we're all fully aware now, it has huge mental, what's the word?
Benefits.
Benefits, thank you. Yeah, it has huge benefits mentally for you. Physically, of course, it's fantastic for you. It's a great aerobic piece of exercise. But regardless of any of those benefits, I was always happy to put my shoes on and get out the door and go for a run. And don't get me wrong, I take my training seriously, and when I commit to something in a plan, I will try and stick to it. But also, it's okay not to always, if something falls off the cliff or work gets in the way, it's totally okay. It's not the end of the world. And I think always having a little bit of flexibility within your running in terms of just how serious you take it is really important, to avoid things like burnout, to avoid the ultimately falling out of love with it. So I've always considered just having a good mental headspace to be like the key to forever becoming a better runner, or like a happy runner is a better runner at the end of the day. So I am very much adhere to those sort of principles and that guideline.
And when you reach the time of a sub 2:40 marathon, at what point do you say this is enough, or I feel like there's more in the tank? And how do you find that balance? Because you've been chasing faster and faster times that have got to that point.
Yeah.
There needs to be a point in everyone's life when they need to realize that that's not going to always continue.
Yeah. It's such an important thing. And I think that is a really interesting thing, is that what you just said there is actually something that I think so many people forget completely, that there's a ceiling for everyone. I mean, if we ultimately all thought that we could keep going, we would all become world champions and be, professional athletes. There's just not. But I think there is just ultimately a understanding within yourself that being accepting of who you are, that is a really important thing. It's like, that's knowing what's enough for you. And as I am who I am. And I do believe that I can still run a little bit faster, but I dropped any idea that I could be there running sub 2:30s and tried to go with like, you know, sort of the back ends of pro runners or anything like that. And also I have no intention of doing that. That doesn't have the same appeal to me that maybe it could have done 5-10 years ago or something like that. I think you need to learn to be content within yourself and to sort of learning to accept and find out where your boundaries are, but also to sort of find the limits. Don't push beyond it, but still be happy with training towards that or at that limit. That's what I'm always about. So I've never, for instance, I've only ever had about 2 running injuries in the last 6-7 years. And in a world today where I think more and more people seem to get injured, and obviously there's so many reasons why people get injured, but I think one of them is often because we see our pro athletes and we train like pro athletes whilst living a complete amateur lifestyle and having work to do. We can't rest and recover. And I genuinely think that ties in with sort of how you genuinely see your running progression. And I am more than happy to take a step back, to recalibrate, to reassess, to go off and do other things like cycling or hiking or playing golf, whatever you want, something else, anything else. I'm quite more than happy to say, take some time away from the thing you love, because you will always come back to it and eventually fill it with renewed enthusiasm and vigor. And so that is the way that I've always seen that.
Yeah, I agree. As much as you can want to be obsessive about your goals and reaching those goals, and sometimes you need to be obsessive in order to accomplish them, you need to understand that life is as many colours, and there's many other things in your life that are also important. And if you include those in your life and part of your story of your journey into training, then the end result becomes much more worthwhile, no matter what it is, because you've incorporated lots of other things into your life and not just committed everything and put all your eggs in one basket to something that might be unattainable, because, like you mentioned, you're not a pro athlete, you have other things going on in your life. And whatever, as long as you, turn up and put some effort in and follow that plan and that training plan, whatever happens will just be your journey that will be unique to you. And you need to recognize that no matter what that story is, you need to be proud of yourself every step of the way.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually. I do believe fully that, for instance, if you are training, you need to put the work in. You can't just get away with half-assing it. I spend probably 95% of my running is actually done on my own now, just with my work schedule, the way my life is. So I do all of my long runs are on my own pretty much. The majority of my faster runs and actual sessions, a lot of them are done on my own. I am saved, fortunately, by a group of guys who collaboratively we have called ourselves the Speedy Boys. They are sort of my anchors in terms of when I need people to train with. They are the guys that I turn to, and we go off and do our sessions together, because as much as running is, well, it's individual sport, but is now considered far more of a community-based sport now, I suppose, or as in we're far more likely to run together with other people. I haven't been able to tap into that in the way that I once did, but luckily I still have a small group of friends who I can actually, bounce off, who push you, who literally encourage you to, they just push you basically. And that's what you need, right? In anything that you do, whether or not that's running or your work or your career, you always want to be running or doing something with people who are better than you, because they will make you better. I know it's a cliche, I know it's said before, but I do genuinely believe in that stuff as well.
You've become more and more busy recently. Is this because of your coffee business?
It is, yes, the joys of the coffee business.
And the upkeep of Renee.
It's she's an expensive gal. She's
let's first of all paint the picture of who Renee is.
So Renee she is by the second love of my life. She is a vintage 1984 Renault van. She's powered by a thrilling 850cc engine, which basically means there are motorbikes and lawnmowers that have bigger engines than my van. It's hard enough, the van driving, without having an extra 220 kilos worth of coffee equipment floating around in the back of her. But that's what I've done. And so, bless her, it's not her fault. I've just put in an excessive amount of weight into the back of her. And it just means that the poor thing now, regardless of how fast I'm going, I am in some degree thrashing the poor little engine on her. But she's a trooper. She's still going strong. There are many hiccups along the way. And to this day, I can foresee her costing me a small fortune in repairs, in upkeep and everything else. But money can't buy you happiness. And she is that little slice of happiness for me. And I absolutely adore it. And it's my little van. It's my business. It's my branding. It's a little bit of my personality thrown in there, with the name of my business being Trailside Coffee, is an ode and a love letter to my love of trail running, for being outdoors, the adventure lifestyle, and just ultimately just following the path that, is less walked, shall we say, the, two forks in a road kind of thing. I took the path less wandered, that sort of thing.
You have a moving coffee van.
I do.
That you can take and position outside so people can get hot drinks.
Indeed.
Whilst they're enjoying nature on the trail side.
Yes, exactly. And the irony being that for most of the time I operate under a bridge in the middle of Tooting, but it's more than that. It's fine. There's still opportunities.
That's not always been the case. You have been elsewhere, but
yes,
for various reasons you've had to be moved on.
I have, yes.
Yeah. How is business?
Business is good. It is. We're recording this effectively during autumn at the moment, so that is perfect coffee drinking time when leaves are changing colors. I mean, I love this stuff. Autumn colors, the yellows, the browns, blue skies. When it is blue skies, just gets everybody out, right? You want to take advantage of that, the final days of like blue skies and half decent weather before we all start to hibernate and things get darker. So in that respect, business is good because everybody's outside walking the parks. It's cold, people still want a hot drink, so I'm just that person to help you along your way. So it's been good. I'm keeping nice and busy, operating a lot of the days of the week from antisocial mornings all the way through into the afternoon and beyond. So yeah, it's good. I wouldn't have it any other way.
Where are you in Tooting?
So I'm on Tooting Common effectively. So I'm about a 5 to 10 minute walk from Balham Tube Station at the top left corner of Tooting Common Park on Cavendish Road. So I effectively just have a small little pitch there underneath the railway lines. And yeah, I trade there for the most part 5 days of the week. And then when I have private events, weddings, corporate events, etc., I take the van elsewhere. So, and it's all wonderfully fluid in the sense that if I want to, I could take a day off, or I could go somewhere else. I could venture elsewhere. But no, I do believe in like building a form of traction and things like that. So I try to operate down there as often as possible.
How do you find battling the weather? Your weather dependent
elements.
Business.
Yeah, that's a fun one.
Operating outside.
Yeah, I mean,
and seasonal as well. Is there seasonal differences in your business?
Yeah, there's seasonal differences. Ironically, summer actually is the quieter times. Partly because people go away on holiday.
But do you get more private events during that period?
Yeah, so on the flip side, it's wedding season, isn't it? So people would like you to turn up and do a lot more weddings, which is lovely because who doesn't have a good wedding, at the end of the day? So
yeah, and having a coffee van there, it's just such a unique experience.
It's a lovely thing. And I think more and more people are now sort of getting attracted to that idea. I sort of do both the evening of a wedding, which is great. So post dinner, come along, have some coffees. It's great. Some people, they don't want to be drinking and they'll prefer to have a coffee. Other times they might also want things like espresso martinis or anything coffee-based cocktails. And I can also provide that as a service for people. So I do the evenings of a wedding, but also the morning after has become a really fun one to do. You can just picture the scene. It's everybody's slightly worse for wear in the morning, had one too many sherbets, and you are ultimately this beacon of hope and light in their lives sort of thing in the morning when everyone gathers and gets to reflect on the previous night, and you're hungover but you're incredibly happy, and all you want is like a nice cup of coffee and a bacon roll or something like that. And I'm that guy, I'm that person. So I love those sort of events because it is just you're providing a service that people genuinely are wanting and excited for, and also it's a lovely moment to celebrate and reflect on the previous night's antics.
So there's going to be a lot of coffee people, coffee lovers listening to this, and you are an expert in the field. So let me ask you this. What is the key to making a great cup of coffee?
Ooh. Now, it depends on how you look at this, but I'm going to go from an espresso based because that's predominantly what I use on my van. And to get it right, you need to dial in your coffee grinder and your machine properly. So when I say that, I mean it's basically figuring out the right grind size for the bean you're using, because every bean is roasted differently. So you get something from Colombia, you could get something from Ethiopia. They're roasted. The characteristics of that bean, the soil it grows in, the nutrients it takes up, affects the way in which that bean, not just the flavor, but the roasting process. And then ultimately when you grind it, it changes completely. So you need to dial something in properly in order to get the right, what we call acidity. It sounds weird if you're not within it, because you talk about something being acidic or the acidity of something, and it sounds bad, but it's meant in a positive term within the coffee world. And you don't want something to be bitter, i.e. you pull too much coffee through, but you don't want something to be sour, which is often when you extract coffee from the espresso far too quickly. And there is a sweet spot, and it depends on the coffee bean, but there is a sweet spot somewhere between those two where you dial it in, where you get the grind the right size, you get the water flow the right size, and coffee just sings to you. So I would always say, make sure you just dial in the coffee properly before you start.
How does one go about that? What do you mean when you dial in? What have we got to check? Is it about making different espressos and different settings?
Yeah, exactly. So this is also the thing which is often slightly upsetting for people back home, because it can take a while to dial in the perfect espresso shot. You could start off and pour something into your grinder, and the first grind that comes out, you put it into the coffee machine. It weighs the right amount. So hypothetically, we'll say you want to have 18 grams worth of coffee in your little basket, and you want 36 grams out. Just do a 1-to-2 ratio, just for the sake of this. And you've got 18 grams, and then you put it in, and the coffee pours out within 15 seconds. So you're like, okay, well then you need to obviously think in your head, well, is that because the timing, or is it the grind? Well, it's the grind size predominantly. So you then adjust the grinder, make it a little bit finer, so it takes longer for the water to come through. But effectively, this can take a while, and before you know it, you could have gone through almost over half a bag of like retail coffee. And so it can take you at least
expensive game, yeah.
Yeah, it could be a bit annoying, because you could go through at least 4 or 5 different shots at least before you've even remotely got close to sort of the right sort of ratios in your coffee. But once you have it dialed in, relatively speaking, you're very close to where that coffee will always be, regardless of, the date of it or whatever, the roasting date and things. So yeah, it takes a while, but that's the main thing to do.
Well, after the recording, you'll have to help me with the coffee machine I've currently got. I've got a hand grinder. It has its own grinder, this coffee machine, but I'm using decaf, so I decaf my own. I grind my own on a separate grinder.
Yeah.
I found that trying to grind it really fine for an espresso is what you need. It's sometimes maybe it's too fine, because then nothing comes out. And
that sounds interesting.
It's like the pressure is like, it's too much pressure and it can't come through.
Yeah,
because you need maybe slightly bigger grinds.
Yeah, precisely. If it's ultimately you put that into the espresso, into your machine, and you switch it on, and then it seems to take about 30 to 40 seconds before you even see anything.
Or like not hardly anything is coming out, and actually all the water is kind of stuck at the top.
Stuck at the top?
Yeah.
Then yes, I would say that.
So it's too fine.
It's too fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Just jumping in briefly to say, if you've got this far, you're probably a fan of the show. And it would be great if you wouldn't mind confirming that love by following or subscribing to this podcast. It takes just one click from you, but it really does make a huge difference in getting more people to find this show. Thank you.
Anyway, Tom, I feel like we've nattered on enough about me and the delights of my coffee business and everything else. But this is also about you. So how are things, Tom?
I'm okay. Yeah, doing all right. Very busy. Got a week of podcast recordings. You're number 1 out of a potential 4, maybe 5 this week. Trying to batch them up so that I use my my studio setup wisely, because it takes a lot of effort and energy always setting up this equipment. I'm always in different places for various reasons. And then that gives me some content for the next few months. But yeah, otherwise I'm doing fine. I think it's been quite a profound year this year, but a lot of it is quite private and personal. A lot of things happened in my family this year that haven't really been great. We are doing well. But I feel like 2024 has been quite an emotional roller coaster on many aspects of it, not just with what's been happening with my family, but in my own personal life as well. I seem to have constructed a lifestyle, which means that I'm not very settled and always in different places in different times. And that doesn't seem to be wanting to change anytime soon. But that is where I am now. I think since I came back from my cycle across Europe, the last 2 months have just been very unsettled. So I've had a lot of anxiety in the background, trying to work out where I'm going to be. Lots of things just not working out as I maybe planned or hoped. But I know that it's just a wave and this will pass. And as with any storm that happens, it can be quite tumultuous in that time. But eventually the calm does come around and things do settle. So I feel like maybe I'm on the turning point of this.
The upturn. Maybe. Yeah. You've been going through the ebbs and flows of the lifestyle in which you lead at the moment, I suppose. And I think that's probably quite an important thing to sort of pick up on, is effectively that there is an element here that it's not all sort of rainbows and sunshine, and the freedom and flexibility that such a lifestyle entails also has a cost in some ways of, as you say, operationally, in terms of how you move about, where do you stay, all these things. And they are things that for many of us, we just take for granted, right? So I guess from your perspective, that must be at times a bit of a roller coaster.
Yeah, I should signpost and maybe actually kind of open up about what my life has been like in the past 2 years. So 2 years ago, I had a change in my life circumstances, which meant that I moved out of my flat that I was in and was able to be in a position where I could become a nomad and not actually have a fixed location of where I lived. And instead, I live in other people's houses. And it's not something I've really shared because I never thought I'd be doing it for long. I just did it for the winter back in, 2 years ago. But it became quite successful, at least in its first year. And I've continued doing it. It allows me the time to work on creative projects such as this. It gives me space to be in locations such as where we are recording today. But it's not permanent and it's always forever changing. I think I got very lucky in the first year to be in the same locations quite regularly and for long periods of time. This second year that I've been doing it, a lot has changed in that. I've not had the same consistency, but then there's also been things in my private family life which have meant that I've been outside of this kind of lifestyle. So I feel, this particular year, a little bit emotionally exhausted. And I suppose there's been a few things happening in my life that have made me consider, I suppose, where and how you choose to spend your energies with different types of people. And I feel that I guess I question, why is it that the people you sometimes give the most to are ones that don't appreciate it and abuse that position that you put yourself in? And then sometimes in the fallout of that, you become so emotionally drained that you end up carrying negativity onto the people in your life who are the ones that do the most good for you. And that's not fair on them. And you end up being in this state when you're emotionally available to appreciate those people who deserve you to have your full-time presence and your relationships with them.
I need to think about what to even ask you on this part here, because it's this it's a very personal thing.
Yeah.
So I don't want to ask you. I don't want to ask you anything that is genuinely like on the actual personal note. But I would say it's more like.
Let me elaborate more. Keep thinking about it. There's been a few instances that's happened this year where I feel like I've tried with a certain type of a person, but it's not been matched, and that same energy has not been appreciated or even been rejected. And it's made me realize that it's okay not to try and be friends and like everyone. That actually you can pick and choose who you give your energy to, and those people will be the people who prove themselves to you over time. And you shouldn't try and please everyone if they're not willing to accept your good energy.
Do you find then that this year perhaps you found almost the level in which you can tolerate or accept elements of a relationship, or you know more about yourself in terms of what you can appreciate or what you can accept and tolerate in a relationship versus previous years when maybe there are toxic elements within friendships, relationships, or whatever? And do you think now you are in a better position to hopefully like move forward?
Yeah, there's been, I suppose there's a few different things from that. I definitely I'm feeling more and more confident knowing how to recognize those good people in your life and then to divert your energies towards them, and to be confident enough to ignore the people who don't give you that same energy back in return, and they're not worth wasting energy on. And this is not just in relationships, this is in friendships as well. There's been times even I had a profound experience at Glastonbury this year where I really tried with a certain type of person and that was completely rejected and left me completely abandoned on this world's biggest like festival stage, and really has helped me align and be confident knowing that if I'm confident with who I am, and if someone's not going to accept that, you need to not bother trying, because it's just not going to end well if they're not willing to accept that.
Yeah, I think you make an interesting point on there, actually. So part of this, again, I'm really interested in is sort of, again, the idea is, are you better now at ultimately giving something to somebody, or you recognize that there are certain people that you are willing to give more of yourself, your time, your energy, your space to, with the idea that you get nothing in return? And again, I think there's a really interesting balance here when I see these things about, can you do something for somebody ultimately without ultimately for any want in return, in the context of you have people who you will do that for, and like those are the friends that you are like, they will stick with you through thick and thin. And then there are people who you begin to realize that you will do so much and bend over backwards for people or try to please them or something like that, as you mentioned, and it just backfires spectacularly in some way, whether or not it's because you've realized you become too emotionally like invested within trying to make something work.
Yeah.
I just think it's a really interesting conversation to have with the way in which people relate and things. Like you could bend over backwards for somebody where it would never work, where it's just a one-way like relationship or friendship, and they will bring nothing in return. And then equally, there are people who, you just have to drop them a little message every now and again, just like checking in, see how it's going. And that is perfect in terms of how your relationship works. And it's like, thanks, mate. Like, that's all good. Yeah, this is happening, blah, 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 blah. I think it's just a really interesting thing that you are going through, or like you've been going through.
I feel like certainly in the last month, I've arrived at a place with a really good group of friends who have kind of just filtered their way to the top over a few years of getting to know them, and it's made me really appreciate and feel very lucky to have those people in my life. And you compare that to, for the past 2 years, I've been putting myself out there, trying to meet lots of new people, and just seeing where the adventures lie by doing that, and where people what people will come back to me in return. And it's just so interesting now to look back at that on hindsight. I definitely reached a point where I got really exhausted of just going out and just putting my best self out there, and felt the need to actually, I think I need to settle with, a base of friends, for instance, and not feel the need to kind of constantly be meeting new people.
Yeah.
It's healthy to have that in your life. But I think I've been doing that constantly for 2 years, and I got a bit exhausted even of that process of just putting myself out there, that I just needed to be like, hang on, no, I don't want to just go into a group of strangers no more. And I'm very confident doing that and striking up conversation in the circle of people that I do that with. But I feel like I need not just some kind of grounding, some kind of roots.
I was going to say, do you then feel that like freedom is intrinsically linked with the idea of being in some way anchored or rooted somewhere? The two seem like diametric opposites when you see it, thinking of like being free and being able to travel or like move around, and as you said, live nomadically. Whilst on the other end of the spectrum, though, it sounds as if like at the same time, in order for you to sort of utilize and fully appreciate and do those things, or to really get the full pleasure and enjoyment out of it, there also needs to have somewhere in there needs to be an element that is grounded and anchored. And that doesn't mean it has to be like a physical place necessarily, but whether or not it's like a group of friends or people, those that you can rely on, etc., etc. Do you find that is potentially what it is?
Yeah. From an outsider point of view, people could absolutely adore my lifestyle. Be like, oh, you're so free, and I love the fact that you can just roam around. But actually, you don't see what goes on behind the scenes of every time I move from one place to another, the energy that takes, and then arriving somewhere completely new or different. And I have to try and work out where I am, where the supermarket is, where the nearest transport is, and where. So I've been making my way back home from places and been like, hang on, where am I living right now? And there's that aspect of it, which is what I call my compromise in my life with my working situation at the moment. But there's been times when I've also just not had access to being in London, which is a place I've lived for the past 12 years. And now recently, I've really felt the need to be more here to keep my friendships and relationships open. And that has been really part of a bigger anxiety of mine is losing that access, even if it's for just for a couple of weeks. I feel like all my communities are here, all my friends are here, and it is my home. I've had a kind of a push-pull relationship with it at the moment, where it's not allowing me to be here fully. But when I am here, I make sure I make the most of it and spend all my time with people and friends, and do podcasts, which is where we are now this week. And if going back to the state of the podcast, we have potentially 4 recordings. I've definitely, and this, when this comes out, I hopefully will have done them. But let me tell you who's coming up on the show in the next few weeks and months. I'm hopefully going to talk to Fiona English, who, I don't know if you know her, she's in the running community in London, but she wrote an open letter to Boston Marathon, who to challenge their pregnancy deferral system, which they didn't have one. So if you were pregnant, you weren't allowed to run the Boston Marathon. She was part of many women who have been advocating for that over the time. And so I'm going to talk to her about that and her story, and also her story of being a runner postpartum. So as a new mother and rediscovering running again, and what that whole life has been for her. I've also got Pete Cooper from Cooper Runs, the Cooper running app, who's going to talk about his story. And then hopefully another episode with a lady called Tracy Bravo, who I won't go into detail of it. And when it comes out, you'll see, has a story which I think is rarely talked about, but deserves to be shared. And she's been very open and honest with her story, which has basically revolved around having a child outside of a relationship as a single mother, having IVF from a sperm donor, and the story of that child in her life and what that has done to her life in bringing her worthwhileness and bringing her adventures. So that's coming up. I also want to talk about the latest episode, which I put out last week, which is the filmmakers from the British documentary 6 Inches of Soil. I've been sitting on that for most of the year. We recorded that in January. And I was waiting and hoping that they would publish their documentary on a free streaming site, which they haven't done yet. You can still stream it. You can pay. It's the price of a cinema ticket. I recommend watching it. It's a great documentary. Really good filmmakers. And I sat down with them in January, and I put the episode out last week, and it has gone pretty well on YouTube. Some good YouTube success. These kind of stories and topics have always actually been my most popular. So Anna Jackson, the regenerative farmer, was one of probably my most listened and watched episode, as was Adrian Gordon, who has the organic market garden. Both of those two people featured in the podcast. As a result of that, I've also chatted to the makers of the podcast. In 1 week, it's become my most watched, viewed, biggest watch time, biggest number of subscribers it's pulled in, which has been amazing, phenomenal to see. And I rarely try and check analytics, but with this one, I've been like, really interesting to see where it's going.
Scouring the data, checking to see how it is. I mean, it's a fascinating topic as well. Like, so I know Anna Jackson from when she used to live down here in London. We used to meet up on the regular sort of thing as two freelancers back when she was doing her photography and videography, and followed her story and her family story and the Pink Pig Farm and their regenerative program. And it's been absolutely fascinating to see. So I still haven't watched this documentary yet, but I do remember seeing when it came out and they were premiering it, and it looked great. So I will also be one of those people to try and find a place where I can rent it and have a watch, because
it's great that it's from British filmmakers, from a British lens. It's certainly going to have an impact on the worldwide scale. It already has. It was shown at COP earlier this year. It's been doing really well with its own private screenings across the country. It's had lots of screenings in like farms and manor estates and places where rewilding is really popular as well. I think there's one going on at the Knepp wilding place down towards Worthing.
I went there a few weeks ago.
Yeah, did you see the pigs and the storks?
I didn't see the pigs and the storks though. No. As in, so it's a sad time. As in, I went down there because I've read the book. They also have a book, Wilding, funnily enough.
Yep.
And again, I found that fascinating. It also was fascinating because in many ways, it just went back to things which you kind of already know, or you thought you knew, and that I was just the way in which we sort of perceive history and the way in which we've looked at certain things and data and science and things. It's because we're quite limited with our actual history in terms of how far the data actually goes back. And then when you look even further back beyond the data, you then realize, oh, this like the way to repair the wild and things like that is actually, it goes further back than what the data had originally suggested. It's like all the way back, and I love it. Thought it was great.
I've been trying to get Isabella Tree on the podcast, who wrote the book, and there's a film, I think a documentary about it that's just been coming out in the last few months, which is why I've been trying to get her on to talk about that. Work in progress, we'll see. I've got connections down in that area of the world, so I'm trying my best
to be continued
to get into her DMs that she can read. But yeah, these stories, these topics have been actually, it's very interesting because these have always been part of what I've been interested in, and it's always part of what the direction I wanted to go with the podcast. And even though I've not recorded them yet, there are people on my list of people who tick off these topics that were already in my original list before I got the podcast going. But then Anna Jackson came into my kind of world, as did 6 Inches of Soil and Adrian Gordon, and those have done really well. So clearly those topics are very interesting and people want to engage with them. I'm not going to do that because they're popular. I'm doing it because I actually have a genuine interest in like gardening and farming and the future of food and environmentalism. So I really feel like that's part of Great British Adventures going forward, and that's something I will continue. And hopefully I can get a lot more people who have similar stories. And if you think about the diversity we have in Britain, there's so much happening across the country with stories like this, which I think I really want to bring to the front and get people talking about. Recently, I obviously came back from I cycled across Europe over the summer. I spent a month cycling, and I put a few podcast episodes out to keep that momentum going. What I failed to realize is that I would lose all that momentum when I came back, and I've been hustling, trying to get more guests on the podcast. So I've had to take a little bit of a hiatus, which is happening kind of quite sporadically over this is the second year I've been publishing. I've just learned to accept it and not worry and stress about the fact that I haven't got an episode to put out when I don't put an episode out. I'm trying to put one out every 2 weeks at the moment, which is still quite a scarce schedule compared to what other podcasts are doing. Some of them are doing once a week, sometimes twice a week. They're much bigger entities who've been going for much longer and have a lot more money and people around them. What I'm doing is everything on my own at the moment. So what I can do, I can do. What I can't do, I don't worry about. And I feel like I wouldn't have been this kind of person maybe 4 or 5 years ago. But there's something about me now. I think I've understood the power of consistency, but also just to not stress out too much, and that things will work themselves out over time. So if I have, 2 months off, which I have had with the podcast recently, it's okay.
Yeah, I think that's like a really important thing to sort of be okay with yourself in that respect as well. It's just simply things happen, life gets in the way, that other things take priority in there. And I think taking a couple of months off, a couple of weeks off, it's not damaging. And it's difficult if you're listening to this on like your streaming platforms and stuff. It's difficult to fully appreciate the amount of effort that goes into this, because I'm currently sat here in, as Tom has mentioned, you don't have a dedicated studio space. So plenty of these people, like podcasts that you listen to that have the money and the infrastructure and the investment, they have a dedicated podcast space. This is done in, as Tom has mentioned, in people's houses who've been kind enough to let them do this. But the actual setup itself takes a lot of time. And I know if you're probably watching this on actual visual platforms and stuff, then you could actually see that, there's lighting, there's other bits in here, but it's a full-on operation, which for a one-man band, I have to fully commend you on. And people underestimate how much time that takes in itself, let alone actually coming up with the content and everything else that you need to produce and create an actual podcast. So I think it's important that people and yourself recognize that, and that it's actually, as you say, it's okay not to be throwing out and hustling a podcast every other day, because it satiates like an algorithm more than anything else. So I commend you for what you're doing. And I think it's really important to recognize that.
Yeah, I think if I use the analogy of building a house, I'm laying the foundations at the moment, but occasionally bad weather's going to come and stop all work.
And I know all about that. So that's fine.
But eventually, once this becomes weatherproof, hopefully, things can kind of continue. And there's hopefully I'll be in a situation that maybe one day I'll be able to put out 1 episode a week. Who knows? But at the moment, this is what I am. And the best decision I ever made at the beginning of this was to put it out every 2 weeks. I was thinking of once a week. The fact that I just said, hang on, let's just do it every 2 weeks. Give yourself some buffer. Best decision I've ever made. I would say, if anyone listening to this, I have put out a lot of invites, and there's a lot of people who've said yes, and maybe I haven't confirmed dates yet, or don't live in the London area. And so I'm working out ways in which I can do recordings with them in different locations. But some people, I won't say who, have invited themselves on the podcast. And if their story aligns with what I want to champion on this podcast, then I've said yes. So if you know anyone, or you yourself think you have a great story, just get in contact. I would love to hear from you, and I'd love to hear from recommendations. Anna Jackson was one of the best recommendations I got. That was from Michelle from Midnight Runners. Wouldn't have known about her story if it wasn't from Michelle.
Oh, amazing.
And yeah, the direction that has helped the podcast go with the regenerative farming and that aspect of it, that avenue of what I want to talk about has been great. And the success of the last episode is because of Michelle being that first person to say, hey, you might be interested in this story.
Yeah, some of those little steps.
So let's talk about the summer, or even actually the past 2.5 years, because there's 2 things I really want to talk about. I cycled across Europe for a month this summer and went on my own little solo adventure. I also have, I finished this maybe 2 months ago. I've been quietly ticking off running every single day. And for it to be an official run streak, it has to be more than a mile or more a day. And I've been doing that for 1,001 days in a row. I started this in the winter of 2021, doing Sean Conway's 496 challenge, where you run the date every day. And on December the 1st, 2021, I ran 1 kilometers, which was actually sub run streak distance. But on the 2nd, I ran 2 kilometers. And then from that day, from the 2nd of December 2021, began a run streak. So by the end of December, I had ran 30 days in a row. And then because I was doing so big distances at the end, like 25 on the 25th, 26th on the 26th, all the way to like 31 on the 31st, I committed myself to do a bit of a cool down week where I ran 10 kilometers the next day, then 9, then 8, then 7. So by the end of that week, I felt a bit more settled. And then I was close to a 50-day run streak. So I was like, let me get to 50. And then I got to 50 and I felt good. And I was like, well, I'll just continue. Next aim is 100. And then after that, next aim was 365.
The way you so casually just roll this off as well, it's infuriating. Okay, I don't think people quite understand. Like I could never imagine myself ever doing anything like this. For instance, you just mentioned there how every single day you'd run an extra like kilometer and things like that, and so you'd effectively. What was the longest week that you were like distance wise? What were you running then at the end? You must have done.
Oh, for Sean Conway's 496 challenge, yeah, I think you run in the region of about 170, 180 kilometers in that week.
In a week, yeah.
Let me calculate it now. 31 plus 30 plus 29 plus 28 plus 27 plus 26 plus 25. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, so yeah, the last week you run 196 kilometers of that challenge.
Fair enough. So yeah, I'm just going to say 200, near enough 200 kilometers there. That is an absolutely phenomenal amount of running and distance to put in your legs, kind of thing.
That was just that one week.
That was obviously just that 1 week.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. But still, even just for 1 week. But on the context, though, that you did that for 1 week and then you still kept on running after doing that.
The next day, the 1st of January 2022, I was broken. Yeah. It was the first time. My partner at the time beat me at parkrun, legitimately.
I mean, I think it's absolutely, like, it is incredible. And part of me, though, I'm going to start at the end instead here, because I'd love to know, how did you actually feel about your run streak coming to an end? Like, both in terms of how did you decide that if you did, and how did you decide that it was the right time to do it? And ultimately, how did you feel?
I felt, so the thing about having a streak is the longer you go, the bigger it becomes and the more you lose when you stop. So when you get to 100, if you stopped, it's going to take you a further 100 days to get back to that position. When you get to 200, if you were to stop then, if you want to get back to 200 in the future, it's going to take you 200 days. When you get to 300, 400, whatever, the further you go, the harder it becomes to let go, because you've built up so much time and you're never going to get that back. Suddenly you're riding the best wave of your life, and it's infinite. It goes on forever, this wave, right? Because as long as you are alive, you keep on doing it. Every day is a new day. All you got to do is do your 2-kilometer run.
That's really interesting.
And it's my choice to voluntarily get off that wave.
Yeah.
Knowing that if I want to get back on that wave again, at the end of 1,001 days, I'm going to have 1,001 days build up to lead me to get back to that wave.
So in many ways, your run streak was built on the idea, the fear of having to keep on to like redo it all over again, or always on the idea that your future self could potentially
the further I got into it,
for that again,
the more I knew I was going to lose. So the more I recognized that I needed to appreciate it, and it's a bit like anything, I suppose. When you try hard in life, you want to be able to be in a position, no matter what happens, you want to be in a position that you can walk away. If you choose to walk away from something, whether it is a job, a relationship, or a run streak, you want to know that you can walk away with no regrets.
Yeah.
Because you might not ever get that job back again. You might not ever get that relationship back again. And you're certainly not going to easily get that run streak back again.
I enjoy that.
So how I felt at the end was I needed to be confident that was it. So I toiled with when I would stop, and actually 1,001 was never actually my initial aim. As I said, I started at 50 and 100 and at 1 year. And then after a year, I just continued and I was like, I'll see if I can get to 500. I like the idea of 501 because, 500 Days of Summer is a great film. 500 Days of Running, it's a nice little thing.
I can see that, nice little tie in there.
Yeah, it sounded really good. 500 days.
Yeah.
And I got to 500, and then I was like, okay, now that I've got to 500, I will allow myself to stop when I want to. I've given myself the permission. I was like, now you can stop. I didn't stop then, but I was like, when it feels right, you can stop. And maybe I was hoping for to do a big event or to get to a magic number, like maybe 555 or something like that. I just continued. It was just part of my life. I got up every day and I knew I needed to run. And then I think I put it on my Instagram bio, run streaker 560 days or something. And as soon as I put it on the internet, it didn't feel big. It just didn't seem like a big enough number. And I was like, it's something about these 3 digits that's just not quite big enough for it to be warranted to be celebrated on this internet, which is full of, huge accomplishments by, people doing amazing things. And I think I knew deep down then, even though I was only just maybe halfway through what was eventually my full run streak, that I needed to get to 4 digits.
Yeah.
And 1,000.
Yeah, you'd sort of kind of relented to the idea or the concept in some way that, as you say, you knew that I needed a big number. You needed something to make that, as you said, 3 digits, superfluous, forgotten. There's 365 days in a year. It doesn't matter. What's an extra another 365 days? But 4 digits, yeah, that's quite incredible. And I guess you've already touched on this, but working our way backwards here, I'm also curious in terms of how easily did it become part of your everyday life? I know it's a mile, but still there are plenty of days where even the idea of a mile is probably absolutely detrimental to the day that you're having or something like that. Did it just ultimately become second nature?
No, that would have been a lot easier if it had been second nature. I reluctantly did this. It became something which I never actually wanted to do. And so it felt very forced. I was lucky in the first year. It was a big part of my life. And after I did these big challenges and I was on this huge roll of a wave of running and going to lots of different communities and spending my weekend doing long runs, it got to a point somewhere halfway through the year that I calculated I was averaging 12 kilometers a day. And so I knew perhaps that my big target for the first year was to do 10 kilometers a day on average. And that became a big focus. And I got to 365 and I just averaged, I think, roughly about 10 kilometers per day every day, which is a 70 kilometer week, which is some serious mileage. After that, I knew if I was going to continue this to 500 and beyond, I needed to have a more relaxed outlook on it and not put the pressure on me to do such big mileage. So a lot more of the smaller runs came into my play and I just did the bare minimum, which is, for me, it was about 2 kilometers just to make sure I did over a mile. By the end of the run streak, I was doing more 2 kilometer runs than I would have liked. And I was saving them till the end of the day. I would regularly get to 11 o'clock and be like, oh crap, haven't done my run yet. And I'll just go out, quickly do my run and then come back and go to sleep. But there's a lot that goes into going outside and running a mile. It's not just, it could take me about, 10 to 12 minutes to do the actual run. Sometimes a little bit longer if it wasn't feeling great. I rarely did it faster because if I was feeling that good, I would go and do a longer run. I would only choose to do a shorter run if I didn't feel great. But in order to go for a run, there's so much, you have to prepare yourself for going outside into the elements. And I'm someone who just took forever just to leave the door. You've got to get your gear on. You've got to get your shoes on. You've got to lace them up. You've got to know that you are well hydrated and fueled well, even if you're going out. And on the days when I felt ill or just a bit down or not in a great place, it took even far longer to get out the door. Sometimes I'd be fanning around for hours before I even did my run. And then you're combining that with a busy work schedule or travel or a bike tour, which I did at the end of the run streak.
Yeah, I think it's I think with a lot of things, with running in particular, the hardest part is, as most people say, is the getting out the door in the first place, and that we can often make a mountain out of a molehill, and we can procrastinate till the cows come home as well, I think, before we get out the door. You mentioned there about the reluctance of it and how it wasn't just a second nature sort of thing, which would lead me on to another little question here, which, again, it'd be interesting to get your take on it. Do you feel that were there more positives or negatives that came out of it every day that you were running? Because I see it as some people get out the door and they, you do that mile or you do that run, you come back and some people feel re-energized, repurposed, they feel good about things, and they've managed to sort things through in their lives or whatever. But doing that for 1,001 days, did you feel that you were feeling better mentally, physically after it, or was it more the challenge aspect of it that was the rewarding side of it?
The biggest thing I learned, the biggest takeaway from my whole experience is the power of just getting outside and going to do some exercise. No matter how bad I felt before leaving, as soon as I was doing the run and after about 5 minutes, everything just fell into place and I would feel so much better. And then suddenly that hour of faffing about at home was just like, why? When I feel so good in the now. And without having this in my life, I would not have got as much outdoor time as I would have. And I've now seen this in the fallout in the last 2 months, when I have gone days, I've been busy with work, especially with editing, and I've just not got my outdoor time because I no longer have to.
Yeah. The runner's high is sort of, it disappears quickly. And as you said, if you spend your time indoors, because I am in exactly the same boat as you, that don't get me wrong, I'm still going out and I'm running, but I haven't been able to run as much as I would like to run. And I recognize it very quickly within myself, just how I can become a little bit ratty. I'm more impatient. I'm less tolerant of things. And that all stems from simply being able to take that first step out the door. And then we can actually, things just, as you say, fall into place. Breathing, like your heart rate, everything, your mind just clears. I mean, it's not the same for everybody, but my mental health and physical health is intrinsically linked to simply stepping out that door. And as you say, just whether or not it's for a mile or for 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever, it's so important, I think, for everyone to do. And I guess going back to your run streak though, I was going to say, what was it about it in the first place? Was it mostly the driving of the numbers in terms of seeing that you could go from 500 to, or from Sean Conway's all the way to 500 to 1001?
I think I've always been someone who's created my own adventures in life. And that's something I've done with running. I've done Sean Conway's 496 challenge twice. I've done the David Goggins 4x4x48 challenge twice as well. I love going and doing my own trail runs and creating routes and just seeing where life takes me down that course. I'm not someone who's motivated by events. I've done very few events in my life. I've done only one marathon. That was because my sister gave me a place to do that. I'm not motivated by those kind of traditional running goals. For me, it's more about how can I make it personal to myself and find that my own adventure. And I know that life can be more worthwhile if you can create things like this. So this just became another running challenge. But unfortunately for myself, it became the longest and most hardest running challenge I've ever done in my entire existence of running challenges. So it was always going to have an end. It couldn't be my life. I didn't want it ever to define me. I didn't want to be this run streaker that carried on for the rest of my life, because that's not who I am as a person. I'm not a runner in that sense.
Yeah.
It was just a challenge. I never knew how long it would go, but that exposes the story of a run streak.
Yeah.
That it becomes
It does happen. Yeah. And I like that. And I like what you sort of picked up on there as well, in that, because I consider myself to be very similar to you in that respect. It's probably why we get on so well, is that I am not I do not make running is a huge part of my life, but you and I'm not necessarily defined by my running, as in my entire personality is not running in some way. And I love the way in which you did this, and you were able to just recognize sort of like, this was time to let it go. And you did you got exactly what you wanted out of it, achieved what you wanted. I think that's really important. I also think it's very interesting now to see that how do you feel without a run streak, and how are you getting on effectively without running in the same way that you once did?
There's a few things actually. Yeah, I've realized how much I needed the run streak in my life to get myself out there motivated. But when I stopped, it was a condition with myself that I would stop and I would take a full break from running. I didn't want to just like have one day off and then like run for 5 days. I knew I needed like weeks off running, because I've become also very traumatized. I've had PTSD by knowing that every single day I need to get out and run. That's just been something that has been part of my life that has held me accountable, that the day that I don't do that will be the day that I lose my run streak. One thing I've discovered since giving up the run challenge is how much I needed it in my life to give me my daily shower. And I have neglected some certain healthcare routines in cleanliness because I have had too many days now where I've not done any physical exercise at all while I've had this enforced break. I even counted recently, last week, I think I went 3 days without a shower.
Okay.
Which is my longest streak of not showering since.
We can beat that. I'm sure we can. We're going to go 4 days next week. I can see it now. It's fine. You know,
that's because I've woken up, not done any physical exercise, done a lot of work, and then gone to bed, not feeling like I've been dirty or whatever. But because I went out for a run, I got sweaty, and a 2 kilometer run is just enough for at least my body personally.
Perspiration to
kind of just get that body warm. So I've showered every day because of the run streak. Since then, I haven't.
Proud of you. It's a lovely moment. 3 days doesn't sound too bad though.
It felt a bit icky. I think I did. It's because I've not realised it, and I've just been on my own doing my own thing. And then
that's a different matter when you're like, oh, I didn't realise it.
Yeah.
Or was it just like, bit of Lynx Africa, off you go, out we go.
I didn't smell bad.
Oh yeah,
but that's because I wasn't doing it well.
Yeah, who was going to tell you that? Hey,
no one was around to verify that claim.
It's a bold claim.
But yeah, I think I do need something. I've had 2 weeks off now. I've had 2 months off now where I've ran about once a day. Where I've ran once a month.
You ran once a day.
This is the trauma coming back. I've had 2 months off where I've ran about once a week, and just a small amount. It's even got to the point where I didn't even go to a group run on Saturday. I just felt all over the place. I just couldn't motivate myself to even go to the group run. I just thought, I'm just going to get changed into my normal clothes and go meet my friends afterwards. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, and not have a shower.
And not shower.
Love it.
I need something back in my life that gets me going again. We'll see. Maybe I'm just on that inflection curve at the moment, and I've just hit rock bottom, and then I'll get back on it again. But I think I've now got rid of that kind of trauma out of me that needed to feel like I needed to be running. Maybe that'll still be with me. I had a moment a couple of weeks ago where I was out with friends one evening, and I was like, crap, I'm not done my run. And then I realized I don't have to.
Yeah.
And then I relaxed and I was like, oh, because otherwise I've been like, oh God, I've got to go. So I've got to go. Or I have to do it at 10 to midnight or something.
It's a dangerous game to play that, to always be searching for something, and to always be looking further ahead and not enjoying essentially the present and the time off and stuff. That's why, again, I won't tie it back to, but I always thought the same with when it comes to things like marathon running. You should do exactly the same. It's once you've done your marathon or something, don't just take a couple days off because, well, everyone's different. But as far as I'm concerned, it's no, you deserve to take that off. And also because it's just you've gone through an ordeal, and you should be able to enjoy other aspects that isn't running related necessarily. So I've full kudos to you for going and actually taking the full 2 months off, and obviously with the occasional runs interspersed in there. But speaking of that, where do you then feel, if you're now ready to get back on that horse, shall we say? Is this more a case of you're going to get back into, is it running that you're thinking?
get more back into running. Yeah,
do you think you'll be back into running? Or
we're heading into the winter season, and traditionally that's always been a running season for me.
Yeah.
I love going out in the cold and darkness and going and doing some muddy trails. But I've just lost that spark. It will come back. I don't know how. I'm a bit like with the break in the podcast. I'm not going to put too much pressure on myself.
Yeah.
Just maybe I know I need to do something. Perhaps maybe put on a little bit of weight since I've stopped running so much. I've lost that little bit of momentum. I've also just lost that spring in my step that's kind of got me going and having it part of my routine. I'll find my love for it. It's been part of my identity for over 2 years, nearly 3 years. And I need to kind of rediscover what my life was like back then, 3 years before, when I didn't have this in my life, when I was still running 3 or 4 times a week and having a good time with it, mostly with group running. I'll get back to it. We'll see. Let's check in again later date. There were some questions that I put out on social media that people have come through. Do you want to read me some of those?
Absolutely. So yes, we have a few questions here. A good mix going on here, but we'll start off with Shane right here, and with a very, very practical question here of how are your knees?
This is a good point, actually, because I guess you're kind of talking about injury and how my body was over the course of that 2.5 years. My knees are very good. My body and my legs were in a great state throughout those 1,001 days. I rarely had any issues at all. Certainly no injuries. Potentially the odd niggle every now and then. And in that time, I ran some marathons, one official and a few unofficial ones. And I did some high mileage weeks, as I've talked about earlier. But I think I arrived at a place in my running just before this where I was very confident in my technique, which I'd kind of refined over time to be kind of quite injury resistant.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of injuries that come from running come from poor technique. So I've gone through several kind of bouts of injuries and refined what I define as a good running posture. I also knew, and the run streak was a really good example of how to run within your limits, because every day I was running, I was always knowing I was running the next day. So I didn't put it all out there every single session. I was always being quite conservative, knowing that I would build over time. And I think that's actually a really good mentality for every run that you go to, is that it's not all about just that one run. You can't put it all out there in that one run. You save it for race day when you do a race, and then, go full send. But in your regular training runs, just be happy knowing that you need to step back a little bit, find your comfort zone, and then slowly build past that. If you're doing, let's say, a session where you're doing some tempo or whatever, and be comfortable knowing where your baseline is, and let that set and be something that you can return to day after day after day, and know that you can still do lots of running in that zone, and your fitness will build as a result over consistency over time.
100%. Like, consistency is, I always say to anybody who gets into running, like, consistency is key. But you've also picked up on what I would consider one of the most missed things in anything, and that is just working on your running form. It's the most accessible thing to do in the world, to go running, right? But actually, ultimately, how many of us actually genuinely think about our running form and our technique and our foot placement and how we land? And obviously these days we negate things through the use of technology and running shoes and things like that. But ultimately, I think running form is a huge part in terms of negating injuries. And also, as you say, you've already built up some form of resilience within your body. And the other thing is, as you said perfectly, is that full send on a race day. But even when you're doing a threshold session, if you're doing a hard track session, you could do an all-out effort for a rep or something, but that just negates the whole point, because you'll be shot to pieces for the rest of the session, and there's no point in doing it. It's about finding, and you'll learn this as time goes on, that it's finding that limit or that threshold or that effort that you're at the moment, and that's only has to be at the moment. Don't run to what your future time wants, what the time is that you want to get. Run to the time that you can do at the moment. And then you just ever so slightly creep past it just for a little bit and then get back into it. And I think you did a really good job there of just demonstrating that, you'll run. And if you needed to run harder, you could, but then you would always you're always doing it within a certain limit so that you ultimately weren't putting the continuous stresses on your body that could never recover. So yeah, your demonstration there of like 1,001 days with only a few niggles and no injuries. Fantastic.
Let's have another question.
All right, so moving on now, we've got Lucy, and Lucy kindly asks you, how many pairs of running trainers did you get through?
This is an interesting topic and one that's very close to my heart. I haven't bought a pair of running shoes for many years. I have been reusing shoes that are well past it, and let me go get a pair. Okay, you're gonna laugh at this. These can't remember when I bought these. These are my current running shoes.
I can see the tread on those right now.
The tread is one thing,
or what I would define as lack of.
Lack of tread is one thing. The fact that I can squeeze at least 2 fingers out of both sides. 3 fingers out of that one.
An important characteristic of all trainers. That's on the outside.
There's a bit of glue that I tried to repair them with. Okay, they don't look great, and they're quite embarrassing to take to group runs because I get called out on these a lot. These shoes, if I check my Strava stats.
But Tom, this is a perfect demonstration here of the irrelevancy of certain gear and how long you can actually get by with a pair of trainers. Like right now, the way those shoes, despite the way they physically look right now, which is an abomination, they are probably the perfect demonstration of a barefoot runner.
Yeah.
Absolutely no cushioning whatsoever on those.
Yeah, there's some cushioning. These are the Hock Supersonics. I've done 1,000 miles in them. So 1,600, 1,700 kilometers. They were well past it after about 600 kilometers. So I've squeezed an extra 1,000 kilometers out of them.
Good.
When other people would have been them. But I just do feel that we have a sanctity of resources in our life that we should use equipment and gear and clothing to the end of its life. And even though these look like they are the end of their life, I will tell you as a runner, and this is the phrase I use a lot, these trainers still run. I can still run in these trainers.
I'm not against it right now. You're preaching to the choir here, mate. So
and they've got some holes on the sides.
Yeah,
which don't look great.
Airflow.
Bit of airflow.
Yeah.
But the structure still keeps the foot there. The time that I will throw these away is when this hole becomes a problem that my foot starts slipping in the shoe, which has happened with one pair of shoes before. I wore them right to the end, and then I went on one run where my foot started slipping inside the shoe, and I was like, okay, now they don't run. Now they've come to a point.
I'm enjoying this. So this is your next challenge.
How far I can push a pair of trainers.
How far can you push a pair of trainers that I've already done?
There is a disclaimer though, as you can see from the tread, there is not a lot of grip here. On any wet day, these become a huge liability, and in fact are actually very dangerous to run in.
Treadmill, mate, all day. I'm going to see it now.
So I won't, even though I'll probably, at the moment, if it's a wet day like today, I'll probably have to go out in my trail shoes because these are actually too dangerous. So to answer your question, I didn't actually buy any trainers in the whole 1,001 days. I'm quite proud of that. I've got one pair of shoes, which are actually in a much worse place than this, that have done 2,700 kilometers. They're my Brooks Ghosts. I don't have them with me. But because I did such short runs as part of my run streak, I didn't need the best trainers in the world. If I was going out and doing 2 kilometers, I could put my worst trainers on to go and do that run. I'm not going to waste, the mileage on a good pair of shoes if I was only just ticking the box of a run streak to go and do a 2 kilometer run.
You mean you're not going to buy a pair of carbon racing shoes and do a 5K easy run in them? I mean, that's really upsetting. Okay. All right, that's my dig out of the way.
Let's go to Michelle's question.
Michelle's got a good question.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, finally, Michelle, she has asked you, what amount of protein do you eat when exercising daily?
Okay, this is going to surprise a lot of people who are really obsessed about protein. I, in my life, have never, ever counted the protein that I have. It's just not part of what I do with my diet. I do care about protein, but I do not care enough to count it. I don't believe that we need the amount of protein that we feel we need in our life. And actually, it's just an over-marketed ploy to get us to buy protein products, which actually, if you eat a balanced diet with whole foods, you will get enough protein in your diet as standard just from those foods alone. You don't need added protein in your diet.
And in terms of protein, Tom, are you a meat eater, or are you veggie or vegan or anything like that?
I'm vegan. I have been for 5 years. So my entire run streak has been vegan. I've done the 1,001 days, fine. No niggles, no injuries. Felt great. I've done my cycle across Europe, which we'll talk about shortly as well, as a vegan. And protein has never been an issue for me. And this is, I mean, we could really talk really deeply about this. It's something that I'm really passionate about, but I don't think it's really for this conversation. And I don't think I'm really an expert. But I will say that when in your life have you known anyone who is protein deficient? In the Western world, that's not the case. No one is protein deficient. No one goes to the doctor with some illness and they say, you know what you need more protein. It just doesn't happen. In developing countries where food is scarce, then yes, that's an issue for them. But in our society and the diets that we eat, we get more than enough protein from the foods we have without having added protein on top, without having protein bars or protein yogurts or protein shakes. I used to be someone who thought that, having a protein shake after a workout was what my body needed, but that's actually just what I've been sold.
Yeah.
And that idea. And if you do your research and you look into nutritional guidelines of what protein you should take as per your body weight and size, and then you look into the foods that you already eat that don't have added protein in, you'll find that you'll get enough protein from those food sources.
Or it would just be the other one that I say, because protein is an important part of your diet, but there is ultimately and there's research on it, your body can only absorb so much protein per day. So you can feed it as much protein as you want. You'd have as many steaks as you want and protein powders, but your body will only be able to absorb a fraction of that. It will eventually increase, but you will have to constantly do that, which means you're just wasting plenty. You're just eating protein without having any benefits, recovery benefits from it, muscle building, repairing, etc. at all. But going back to that original question though, as a vegan, what did you take, or what would you eat on these days?
My diet consists of trying to be a whole food plant-based diet. So whole foods where possible. And that's me probably 95% of the time. And then I have like a 5% allowance to go and eat crap, whenever I have to, or if it's convenient to do so, or if I have, scarcity of good, healthy food. What I eat curries. I eat tofu is probably the main protein source, if you want to call it that. That goes into them. I eat rice and pasta, potatoes, whole grains, lots of bread. So I make my own sourdough bread, which is minimally processed. It's really hard. I don't really. One thing I've done a lot of research in diet. Was certainly when I turned vegan, I did a lot of reading and discovered the whole food plant-based diet, which is something that I really subscribe to, and I encourage people to look up. And there's a lot of scientists and nutrition experts, and nutritional scientists, not nutritionists, because I don't think they're a bit different to the actual science-based people themselves, who advocate for whole food plant-based diet. I generally in my life subscribe to Dr. Greger's Daily Dozen. So if you look out for that on the internet, he gives you 12 different food types, which you should be getting in your diet every day. And he gives recommendations on what portion sizes you should eat. Now, I aspire to that, but I don't achieve it every day. It's something that's inachievable, I think, in a day-to-day life, but it's something I aspire to. And one of the things that I can call out is like he recommends like 3 portions of beans per day. So I always make sure my fridge is full of hummus, because that's essentially one form of bean. And I know that I can get at least one of those forms of beans per day with hummus on toast or something like that. And that's a healthy snack that I can have throughout the day. But within that, there's like eating cruciferous vegetables, leafy greens, whole grains. And that's something that I think that the world of diet can be so complex, but I think that is the most simplest form that I could ever give to anyone. And the Daily Dozen is something that I aspire to every day.
Very nice. Okay.
Let's move on from my run streak. I want to talk briefly, and if you don't mind actually quizzing me, on my little cycle ride that I did this year. I left London in July, at the end of July, and I went and cycled all the way down to the coast, got a ferry across to Dunkirk, and then cycled to Berlin, and then got a bus to Munich, and then cycled into the Alps, across the Alps into Switzerland, and then I made my way slowly back home from there. It was a journey that took me 29 days. I think I crossed, 8 or 9 countries in total along that way. Various different languages each day, which this is the biggest journey that I've taken by bike. It's been the most adventurous because I've had to cross multiple countries. I've not done a tour that's crossed that many countries in my touring experience. But it's something I knew I needed to do this year. I needed to get out and do an adventure. I've not left the country in 5 years. And so that was also a big part of it, is to get out there and do something like that.
Yeah, well, that I think is a perfect place to go and start, really. My thing was go to ask was why? Why do this? What was the inspiration, the motivation and the reasoning behind going and doing this journey?
I've been a bike tourer for the last few years. I've cycled across France. That was my first ever bike tour. Doing the length of France. It took me 3 weeks. Off the back of that, the next year I cycled the length of the UK and did Land's End to John O'Groats. So I did that solo in 9 days, camping along the way. And since then I've done some smaller tours, some of the cycling UK tours I've done, and I've not done a big cycle tour since my cycle across the UK in 2019. And off the back of that, I really injured myself. My knees were absolutely spent. The first day, I woke up on day 2 and my kneecaps cracked on both my knees, and I'd never come across that before. And that was quite a profound experience and quite a hard experience. Doing the length of Britain in 9 days solo took a lot out of me that I needed a lot of time off cycling after that. And then COVID hit and I wasn't in a cycle-friendly place. And then since then, running became more and more part of my life. So I knew I needed to get back and do something. I knew I was coming to the end of my run streak and I needed some new flavors back into my life. And because I hadn't left the country, I was like, I just want to get on a ferry and just cycle into Europe and just see where life takes me. And that was essentially what I did. And the reason why I went to Berlin is because the Adidas running community that I run with were giving away places to their 10K event that was happening in Berlin. That was on a date that I knew I could cycle there from the day that I was planning to leave. So I asked them for the place and they gave me a place. So that became my first kind of checkpoint of the tour. And then after that, I was like, I've still got 3 weeks in my diary and I want to go to the Alps. So I took a bus to the Alps. I didn't know if I was going to cycle to the Alps or get a bus or get a train. And I kind of worked that out when I got there. And someone recommended taking the Flixbus, which is a bus which has bike storage at the back. Which became a really effective and cheap way of getting across to Munich. I was able to reconnect with a friend in Munich while I was there, which was great, and had a few days off the bike while I ate some good food and rested, and then went into the Alps, which then became the journey of a lifetime. Like the next week in the Alps was really what actually defined that tour.
Yes, I absolutely loved following this journey. And, I do remember you mentioning one of your posts and your reels about how it's like saying goodbye to a lover when you leave the back of the Alps. But I guess what were some of the things that you learned on this journey in terms of both actually biking and cycling, and in terms of things that maybe you would do differently?
I really struggled on the first week for two reasons. One, being alone and having to do everything myself. I was planning my route day by day. I had a rough kind of skeleton of an A to B to Berlin, but that was going to take me 9 days, and the bits in between and where I would stop, I was having to work out every day. And I was always constantly working out where the next campsite was, which was going to be roughly 120 kilometers away, because that's the distance I knew I needed to do per day. And I set off on the back foot. I hadn't planned a lot. I didn't have a lot of time to get myself ready. And I was late leaving London when I left, and I arrived at Dover. I didn't even get to Dover on the first day. I had to camp in a random field about 15, 20 kilometers away. And then the next day I had a huge mileage because I had to then do the ferry across, and then it was a super hot day. I think I spent 10 hours on the bike before I got to my campsite, which was then super late. I was always on the back foot, and I knew it would take me a few days to get into the flow of things. And eventually after day 5, my sleep cycle kind of got back to a good place, and I was able to kind of get up a bit earlier and leave a bit earlier and finish a little bit earlier. But I really struggled being on my own, and not really knowing what this tour was going to be. the route to Berlin was not the most exciting or inspiring, but my goal was to get to Berlin by a certain day so I could run this race. So that became that kind of part of the journey that I needed. But once I kind of got into the rhythm, I was able to kind of relax at campsites. I was talking to other bike tourers. I was trying to enjoy that part of it. But I think I was struggling too early on to try and work out what this bike tour was, what the story of the tour was going to be. But I was still living it.
Yeah.
And the story is something that you find in hindsight rather than in that moment, and certainly in the first week. But I think I needed this to be like something. It's like, what is this going to be? And I just couldn't quite work out what it was. And I didn't really know where I was going. Like I had the vision of getting to Berlin, but after that, my route was still undefined and where I would be was still undefined. And I was going to work that out in time.
But did you feel like you were stressed and worried a little bit about beforehand that it needed to be something more? It ultimately needed to be something like maybe more profound. It needed to have a bigger meaning than just being the adventure to go to Munich and see your friends and then go
because
to
I wasn't
Berlin
getting inspired along the way. I wasn't that wasn't that profound experience I was having. Like, oh, isn't this route amazing? Or isn't this amazing? It was just like, just get to the end of the day and then do it again the next day. And that's not the most thrilling of adventures. When I got to the Alps, suddenly then everything fit into place because I was like, I've arrived here at this stunning location and I'm just inspired everywhere I look. It's a postcard. And that then became, okay, this is what this is about. That first week was a warm-up for this section of the tour. And without those first 9 days getting to Berlin, my legs wouldn't have been in any shape to conquer the mountain climbs that I was able to do. Because when you do a long tour, you afford the ability to kind of become fit as you ride.
As you progress, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're not trying to be the fittest on day one. Yeah. Actually, by the second or third week, that's when your fitness kind of comes into play.
Your legs have hardened, your bum's not suffering from saddle sores or something like that. And it's just, I can imagine that. And interestingly, I want to sort of pick up on something which you said there, like it was at the Alps where you felt as if this was the place and this is what it was about, shall we say. And I found that interesting because, and I don't know if you made a conscious decision for this or anything, but obviously you documented a lot of this as well. You put it on your social media. You made some lovely little like videos and reels and things like that. Did you, for instance, feel like maybe you were wrestling at times with, shall we say, Tom the creative, who documents and wants to capture, like, as you said, you were cycling down cycle paths, which absolutely great, but hard to tell, like necessarily to think of and create a story out of it, versus when you were in the Alps, and it was just kind of, you were in the place that you wanted to be. So actually, I almost felt that got put on the back burner, the Tom the creative side or Tom that side of things. Did you feel like you had to make a conscious decision to try and like film and document and record your journey?
Yeah, I think I did a lot of stories on my Instagram page, which a lot of people have, since I've returned, have said how much they enjoyed following. And that's quite good because sometimes you post some stuff and, you can see who views it and you get some reaction, but you don't ever actually understand how people are taking that. I think I needed that aspect of the journey because I was on my own and it just gave me something to do. And I think a lot of what you saw was actually what I was like and what was happening. And when I could be in a position to film something, when it was safe to do so, I did. And I took a lot of photos as well. And anything that happened that I felt was worth telling, I shared in my story. And so when people ask me kind of for more stories of my journey, I'm like, well, most of it is all out there. Like there's not much that actually happened outside of that I can't tell you about. I think one of the things I did realize is that when I got to a campsite and I set up camp and then I did my 2-kilometer run and then had a shower and washed and then had to cook for myself. And then I had to spend an hour on social media uploading all of these because signal wasn't always great. And also, I'd have quite a lot of footage throughout the day to put up there. That's when, I would walk past other cycle tourists who were just sitting on their little chair reading a book. And I was like, that's actually quite nice because I've just not been fully present because I felt like I've just had all these processes of things that I had to do. And then I fall asleep and I get up and do it the next day. And part of me did wonder, if I did this again, would I still capture and document things, but not upload it until I was back?
I was going to ask you this actually, like, would you change that as an aspect about your trip? Because I think it's a really interesting thing of, can you capture something beautiful and wonderful and just like a memory for yourself and almost just have it for yourself rather than just, as you say, having to go and immediately upload something to social media? I think it's a really interesting thing to look at, but be interested to know your thoughts on that. But also, as you said, would you have just maybe videoed less or maybe spend more time, as you say, like reading a book or enjoying like the campsite a bit more rather than that extra hour of having to go through the standard faff of uploading?
Yeah, it was definitely
editing.
The uploading was the biggest issue. And actually I chose to delay my uploads by a day so that I could protect my location, because when you're posting, I was posting my route and my location every single day. Who knows who's, watching and listening and whatever. So everything I was posting was from the day before, just to keep my actual live location secret. So that was a bit of a faff, knowing I had to kind of trawl through like footage. The actual capturing in the moment never felt too bad because I was on the bike for a long time. And so I only captured a small amount of that. Most of the time I was, very present in the moment. I would say one of the things that you can't get across in video is just how hard it is being on that bike in the elements when, it might look stunning because the sun is shining, but man, it is hot pumping up that hill.
Yeah.
And you've sweated about 50 times that day and you just feel disgusting. And I've put sun cream on for like the third time that day. And I don't feel, all I want to do is just feel refreshed and have a shower.
Yeah.
But I felt rubbish in all those times. And there was even one point I took a video. I was on a bridge and there's this beautiful, like crystal clear stream. And I was showing someone a picture and they said, "Oh, wow, it looks amazing." I was like, yeah, it looks amazing. But I can remember at that point, it was like 30 degrees, baking heat. And I just kind of cycled down into a valley where there was just no shade. And it was hard work.
Yeah.
And I could recognize that was a beautiful sight. But there was so much weight on my shoulders from the physical exertion that took on me that
the recognition is there, but the appreciation is certainly not, because there are just ultimately other priorities that are in your life.
Yeah.
Like trying to Hulk 30 odd K.
I was appreciating it, but it always looks better on screen when you've cycled all that way.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different, and you're batting off flies from your eyelids and
Well, I guess the Alps is the perfect example, isn't it, really? Like, we sort of talk about it because it's got stunning vistas and it's beautiful and it's incredible. It's like scenic, and the mountains, and it's all aspirational and motivational and lovely. But people seem to forget the whole, like, you do have to go up a mountain sort of thing. And I can imagine that there are moments, despite being in such a, as you said, like a beautiful location, that you're like, I'm having to cycle for hours uphill, drenched in like sweat, struggling, your heart rate through the roof sort of thing. And there are elements in there which, again, people do not see. That's like a bit of a slog as well. Like, it's all of your own making, so you can't be that negative about it, but it is also at the same time like there are hours in there in which you are probably just working away.
Yeah, I would say something though. So a lot of people have asked, what was like the hardest point in this journey, or what was the hardest bit of it? And I really actually struggled to define, or at least I struggled to define what it was, because hopefully you got this from my stories, that I seemingly was able to kind of bat off kind of any kind of little kind of hardships that happened to me, and just have a smile and continue laughing about it, and I ticked off, some big mileage. It wasn't as big as what I've done in the past, but it was still a lot per day, but it was also manageable. And I got it done, and I got a shower at the end of it, and I got some sleep, and I got off and did it the next day, and I was eating fairly well. There was one moment which I did document in my stories when a kid knocked over my stove with my pasta in, and I was absolutely exhausted, and I was in France, which wasn't really doing me very well for this part of my journey, and it broke my stove. And in that moment, you just wanted to be like, can someone help me out here? No one helped me. And in the end, I had to pick up all these bits of pasta from the ground and go and wash them. And I managed to get my stove slightly fixed that I could recook this pasta and go to sleep again. That was like the hardest part of my entire journey, was just this one little moment when a kid knocked over some boiling water. And I just had to be like, are you okay? Okay, you're okay. Great. Worst things happen. It's just a bit of food. But in hindsight, now thinking of it, the biggest and hardest part for me was sourcing food. It's the first time being vegan that I've left the country. I've gone off to foreign lands. I'm sourcing food from supermarkets probably most days. I rarely ate at restaurants because none of them are vegan friendly, unless I was in the major cities of Berlin and Munich, where I did eat at restaurants. But on the road, I have a very particular diet, which some European countries just don't
cater for.
Exactly. Certainly when you're in the sticks somewhere. So I would mostly be dependent on myself making a sandwich at lunchtime and then cooking some kind of pasta with a bit of tofu in the evening. But because I crossed so many countries, every single country has its own like supermarket brands, and there'd be several brands of that. And in the first, I think 4 days, I crossed like 4 different countries, and there was like a myriad of different supermarkets. So every time I went into a supermarket, I'd want a good, efficient routine of getting food, but then I would just be in a completely different foreign place and not know where I was. And so that inconsistency really bugged me. And to the point where the first few days I found these absolutely banging barbecue flavored crisps. It was brilliant. And, I wanted some crisps at lunchtime. Next day, couldn't find them. Couldn't find this brand.
Yeah.
And then I was into Germany, and they don't do good barbecue crisps. For some reason, they do paprika.
How dare you? Paprika's it's the most beautiful flavored crisp there is.
No, it's not. It's not a flavor. It's not a flavor of crisps.
Paprika Pringles, along with Texas barbecue, admittedly, but as in between those two, you've got the perfect recipe.
Well, it just didn't agree with me, and all I wanted was some barbecue flavored crisps. Wow. And the German countries of Germany and Austria and Switzerland, I just could not find them that readily available. But then also like sourcing, on the way back, I came into France and I was trying to source some tofu in the biggest supermarket, like an Auchan.
Yep.
I could not find any tofu. They have 12 aisles of cheese in the supermarkets of France.
Yep.
But I could not find any tofu or any kind of vegan food. And even on the last day when I was getting the ferry back, I tried to make a sandwich for the ferry ride. All I could get was just a plain baguette.
I could imagine the puzzlement on many a Frenchman's face when you tried to explain to them if they had tofu or vegan food in there. It could be quite, especially in the aisles of Auchan, where you can have, as you said, the cheese and about several lines of carrot râpé or something like that. It's a lovely moment. So I'd love to.
Yeah.
Oh, it'd be a fly on the wall.
That's, I suppose, just the situation that I'm in with my diet. Anyone else with a normal kind of diet, normal westernized diet of eating, meat and cheeses would get on fine, and you could eat anywhere. But I mean, that just kind of posed this kind of topic of like vegans on tour, and how hard and difficult it is. And there's apps that I use that kind of can point out vegan restaurants and veggie friendly vegan restaurants. But they were few and far between, so I was mostly having to do it all myself. So that's just an added level of things that I had to do per day.
Yeah.
The other thing I would change as well is I made my route up and I just went where I wanted to go. In the past, I've done recognized and well-trodden routes that have been guided by other people, and you download the data or you get a guidebook and that tells you where you want to go. And usually they are places that are going to be interesting and inspiring. And for the journey to Berlin and then the journey back home from the Alps weren't very inspiring at all. And it made me realize the importance of actually just doing a well-trodden bike tour and knowing that if people think this is a great place to go, then do it.
Yep. And
there's no harm in just doing an adventurous ride that someone else has already done. If it's, you don't have to create your own journey, which I did, because actually a lot of that journey wasn't fun and wasn't nice. And it only became to the Alps, and that like 9 days I spent in the Alps, which was amazing. But then the rest of that time, I didn't know where I was in Germany, didn't know where I was coming back from France into Belgium, into Luxembourg.
But that's also part of adventure though, right? In certain aspects, I think, like not every single thing we do should be a picture postcard moment. That's just what you see on your Instagram reel. But realities are that adventure is a combination of those wonderful highs and reaching those, but they're often made that much more exquisite and wonderful because you've had to get through some tougher times and actually face adversity. That's why we call it an adventure. That's why we call things like exploration instead of do you explore, do you adventure, or do you travel? Travel is a completely different thing to then saying that you go adventuring. And I think that's a huge thing to point out. So I think for you could do all those things and those like lovely, you could visit all those, you could change that route and make it so it's like every stop has something iconic and beautiful that has been recommended. And to be honest, you'd really enjoy it. There's no, like, why wouldn't you? It would be lovely. They've been recommended for a reason and they're probably very good. But at the same time, I think you are the sort of person innately who enjoys aspects of adventure that is taking you off the beaten path in some way. And some of the most memorable parts that I had on your story was you basically ending up camping in like a McDonald's whilst it was absolutely chucking it down with rain. Because those are the parts of adventure they happen all the time. People don't talk about them, but that is so much of it. It's a bit like, where did you spend your day? As in like, I spent it sheltering in a garage because it was absolutely, the weather was, horrible. But I think that is what makes also everything, that's what makes an adventure, okay? If everybody went and like had picture postcard moments the whole time, as in like you'd be losing the very essence of why you do certain things in the first place. So I don't think you should change it. I think you should keep it as it is.
Well, we'll see. I think next year I might want to make my journey to the Alps quicker and more efficient, whether I'll get a train or kind of another bus there, and then probably just do the entire Alps, going from like France all the way through to Austria.
Doesn't sound like a bad idea.
Yeah, it definitely filled me with confidence knowing that I could take a touring bike over some of the climbs and passes that I went on. And with a slightly refined setup, after getting rid of some of my extra weight that I probably carried for a bit too long, maybe it might be a bit easier. We'll see. Okay, let's move off this. I think I want to actually talk about some of the podcast alumni who've been on the podcast. I've asked a couple of people actually to send little voice notes. I think we'll have time to maybe hear two, but I'll just first of all say that since recordings, Sean Conway has released a book about his Iron 105 challenge. So if you are a fan of Sean and want to learn more about that, then definitely then I'll put a link below to that. But one person I really want to talk about is Deo Kato, who was on this podcast over a year ago now. And at that time, he just announced that he was planning to go on a journey of a lifetime for him, running from South Africa, Cape Town, through Africa, and then through Europe all the way to London. A journey that he would be making on foot, running the entire length. No one has ever done both Africa and Europe in one go. And a few months ago, he completed Africa and made his way to Greece and has now begun his journey across Europe. I think he passed through Greece and Albania, and now you'll hear in this podcast where he is at the moment now. But I just wanted to just bring this back into conversation because it's actually a journey that he's currently on, and you can still follow his updates. It has been the most insane, and I've known some of what's been going on behind the scenes with him as well. But it's the most insane journey that anyone I think could ever go on in their life. And it's just absolutely awe-inspiring to see how much he's already done and how much he is continuing to push on, despite so much adversity that he has faced along the way. For a start, Africa's not an easy country to pass, and he's faced so many problems with, first of all, his route that he goes along there. He arrived at South Sudan or at least on the border of South Sudan, at a time when the geopolitical situation in that country deemed it completely unsafe to pass through. And as a result, there was no way, and this is where it comes you really need to understand what's going on in Africa and certain countries, that and it's something I'm trying to get my head around. But even my uncle, who knows a lot about what's happening in the geopolitical landscape of the continent, has been following Deo and says, I just can't see a way where he can get through this part of Africa now, because no matter which direction he goes, there's a country that's got some kind of something that's going to be deemed completely unsafe. In the end, he's had to take a flight to get to the top of Sudan and then go through Egypt. And that has just become part of his story, and it'll be a bigger part of his story when he comes home to talk about that and bring awareness to what's actually happening in Sudan. But I've got a voice note from him now, which let's play and listen to, and then we can talk a little bit more from him afterwards.
Hi Tom, I hope you're good. Currently, I am in Croatia. So far, it's going well. The weather is good so far, and of course, since I finished Africa and entering Europe, I've now doing this solo, at least for the time being, and it's come with its own challenges. Being solo means not having a vehicle that I am not reliant on, like the vehicle, like carrying all my things. So I'm carrying everything with me, the tent, cooking stuff, all the clothes, extra clothes like jackets and stuff. And also it means like I'm spending a lot more time on my feet, and I am basically kind of like traveling from town to town, averaging around 30 something kilometers a day. And I've had challenges with the weather conditions. They've been a bit tricky. They're constantly changing, so I have to look at the weather all the time. And also, being solo has also come with some benefits of like having the time to be able to process a lot of things that have been going on in Africa all that time, over a period of a year. It's been it's having the time to myself to be able to think and process and understand, also in terms of like migration, the people that do have to migrate, they how they move on this landscape, especially like refugees who are undocumented within the European countries, and the challenges they have to face. For example, like myself as a black person walking with a backpack, I'm being stopped quite frequently by the police and immigration officers. For example, the first day in Croatia, when I entered, the crossing of the border was quite tricky, as I had to spend a bit of time there and being questioned exactly where I've been, what I'm doing, and my passport being really investigated, even though I'm a British person and they can see that. And also I got stopped like about 5-6 times in one day, like in the space of an hour. So these kind of things that do come up, and I'm getting a better understanding of it. Total wise, in terms of distance, I've covered probably like just under 11,500 kilometers. And now being back into Croatia, it means that I am up against the Schengen visa limit. So I have to move a lot more faster now and covering over a bigger distance. The countries like Albania, Montenegro, and Bosnia, they are not part of not in the Schengen visa. So I didn't have to stress so much when it came to trying to cover the distance. So I had a bit more rest time, which was really needed and really helpful for me in terms of like being able to like distress and be able to process everything else. So now I am getting back into it and feel a bit more energized, having that time to be able to recover and move a bit more loosely. Now it's more of like let's go for the Schengen visa, so I can be able to come back in time, or not miss the deadline to exit Europe. It's looking around for me to arrive in the UK around the end of December, probably the last week of December. That's how that's probably when I'll be able to arrive in Europe. I'll be able to arrive in the UK. It is a bit tight, but now it's more of like go time to make sure that I get there. Just want to thank everyone for the support and thank everyone for everything they're doing in terms of like helping me to get back into London. All right, thank you very much. Hopefully, all is well with you.
A lot to unpack there. For many who know Deo's story, he was running the length of Africa. Since he's gone to Europe, as you've heard there, he's lost his support vehicle and he's chosen to kind of do this on his own for the time being. That's probably will change soon, but at the moment he is carrying a massive rucksack and taking all his stuff on his own. So he's basically hiking these countries so far. I think there's plans, in the background to try and help get him some support vehicle so he can get back to running without the rucksack. But also it's so interesting to hear what's been going on behind the scenes, even in Europe, with issues with his visa because of the Schengen visa, but also the fact that he's been questioning a lot because he's a black person doing a journey. And
yeah.
I
think it's very interesting, right? Like most people would, in certain aspects, associate, it's a peculiar thing anyway for, as you said, the dangers as well of being in certain parts of Africa and things, but you are also a black man within a black continent predominantly, whilst, as you said, the questions start coming as soon as you come over to Europe and you entering with her.
Well, just to actually hold you on that, actually, I've known that even being a black person in Africa does not come with automatic kind of rights to pass through.
No, not at all.
There are so many different rules with different countries and so much tensions and frictions between. So he's still seen as a foreigner through many of the countries that he passed through in Africa because he's from Uganda. So passing through other countries that aren't Uganda, he gets treated and like a foreigner. And even having a car that's registered to a different country in Africa means he was more likely to be stopped. That's a world which I didn't know much about.
That's fair enough.
You do assume, right? Just being an African person would.
I made the assumptions less on the police side in terms of like the state and things like that, but more just in terms of on an everyday aspect. Admittedly, I'm sure having support vehicles and everything else draws attention in certain aspects, but yes, it would be. You would think like you would come to Europe, shall we say, and you're on a British and you've got your British passport, that you would be, relatively speaking, afforded certain luxuries. But again, this is just part of his story as well, right? It's incredible. It's nuts. Yeah.
And for those who don't know, he's telling the story of the history of human migration from Africa to the rest of the world. And I think the fact that his story has had to evolve from running to now hiking, and all the issues he's having to face along each border crossing in each country he goes to is just adding to this bigger picture and the story that we tell about the problems of, that migrants face by having to go on this journey today. But it's not just about the historical aspects of where we've all come from. We've all come from the continent of Africa, and that's been proven through what we've found from remains of humans back then, which is a story that he wants people to fully understand, which is long forgotten. But then there's also this issue of migrancy across different countries, and he's one thing that happened to him many months ago now was that he disappeared and was untraceable, and his partner at the time could not get any contact from him and had to bring in Interpol, and then soon found out from someone who was actually in jail with him that Deo had been arrested and was put in jail and spent, I think, about a month or a few weeks, maybe 2 or 3 weeks in jail, unable to have any contact, completely against any human rights laws that there are. That was just before he finished Africa, and I think once he got to Egypt, he's taken some time to really decompress what that has done. That can't have been nice on any form or level, to be arrested on what was essentially a small little thing.
Yeah, it'd be like bogus charges at the end of the day.
Yeah, probably in a state to just be awaiting some kind of bribery to get him out.
Oh, Yeah, almost certainly.
In inhumane conditions. And I'm glad that he's safe and well. And that kind of story is now past. But it's a shame that happened. That should not have happened to him in the first place. He did say he's hoping to finish by the end of this year. I hope he can, but if not, it's looking like it will be very, very soon anyway. It's just it's a few months away, which is really exciting because this has been going on for over a year now, and can't wait to have him back home. And I wish him all the best and all the safety and support that can come his way. Moving on, one more thing I'll bring in. Jonty, who was on the podcast again just over a year ago, again mentioned this at the end, that he was setting up this thing called RunLimited, which was some kind of like running hub that was going to connect all the running communities in London. And since that recording, it's something that has kind of become a thing, and he is now has now set up a pop-up shop in the city of London. And RunLimited is now operating as a run hub, albeit on a temporary basis at the moment, but I think there's plans to bring it in for a permanent space soon. That's very exciting. I got him to send us a voice note about what's been happening since, and then we use this to talk about what RunLimited is and what it can do for you as a runner in London.
So 2 weeks ago, we launched RunLimited, which is the dream that Molly and I have had for the past 2 years, and we've opened a store in St Paul's. It's currently just a 3 to 4 month pop-up as we wait for the permanent space to become available, which is early next year, which is really, really exciting. But this one is slightly different. It's more of a concept piece, and we're focusing purely on shoes, called the Shoe Room. It's focusing on gait analysis, getting the right shoe on the right foot, because we want people to be running forever, not just for this moment that it's having. It's crazy. So we're very fortunate to have some incredible brands. We're still bringing some more in over the next few months. Each week we have different activations. So each week we're partnering or celebrating the brand that we have in store. So the next two weeks is with New Balance, and we have some activations. So we're bringing communities together. Every Sunday we have our Sunday long run, so we're partnering with like affiliated run clubs with those brands. We have this coming Sunday with the Runner Beans from Greenwich. But yeah, it's we finally made it happen, and we're so happy. It's great turnout every day. Gait analysis is fully booked, so if anyone wants free gait analysis, please come down. We use this amazing technology called Arion technology. We actually use sensors that we put in the shoe to make sure that we're actually getting the correct data from the runner, to make sure that we get the right shoe for them or help them in any way that we can. We offer coffee, when we've also got some apparel in there as well, so we're very fortunate to be working with a brand called Bandit at the moment. So we've brought them over from America, and yeah, we're bringing in loads more brands as well, which is wildly exciting. So anyone wants to come down, it's RunLimited on Cheapside in St Paul's, 19 Cheapside. Come say hello. We want it as a space for all runners to come and use. I think even this week we've got some of those fancy recovery boots in. So come and have a coffee and get those legs pumped.
So there we are. RunLimited is operating now in London. It's a very exciting venture. It's something he's been talking about for a while, and seeing it kind of come into fruition is really exciting. He's basically spent a lot of time, and him and Molly have been connecting all the running communities in London to try and connect them, because there's so many now out there. It's creating a space where they can talk and share information and come together and use that hub for their own benefit as well. So he mentioned that, this will be past by the time we put this out recording, but on Sunday, the run community Runner Beans that are based in Greenwich are going to come and use that space with New Balance, their sponsor, and they'll do a run together. I'm sure it's probably trying out some of their shoes as well. So if you want to try running shoes before you buy them, then this is a great space to do that. And the fact that he's going to be partnering with lots of different brands, it's not affiliated just to one brand. Lots of different brands are going to come into that space and use that as a way, as a hub to go off and do a run and then connect with that gear and connect with that shoe. And that's just something that I don't think was a thing 5-6 years ago, but now so many brands are doing these kind of run experiences where you can run with the shoe and trial it out before you commit to buying anything, or just try out some shoes and not have to worry about any commitment to buying it.
Yeah, I think I've loved following his story and like what him and Molly have been doing. So I know they've had a couple of other little like pop-up stores. So they did like the London Marathon pop-up, which they did down in Soho, which again was a lovely place to spend time and to do their runs and their activation events and things like that. So I think it's just an evolved, and this won't sound the best, but it's like an evolved concept of ultimately going and getting your shoes fitted, because you can actually get to experience more than just simply getting, like a pair of running shoes. You can also get to experience what it's like to, you do a full run in them, so it's not just like walking around a store with a lot of these activation events. You also get to experience like a community in some way, so you get to sort of see all these different groups of people. You get to find the ones that you basically feel like you gel, spend more time with, and also just get to meet, relatively speaking, like-minded people. That's the whole point of it being sort of like a community hub. And I love the idea that he has in there, like, the shoe isn't just for, these running shoes, or running itself, it's for life. It shouldn't just be like a moment, because we all, I think, know that running at the moment is a bit of a, like, it is the in thing, but it shouldn't be. It should be an important part of just general health and your lifestyle. So I really like what he's doing there. And yeah, some of the brands that he's bringing in, things like Bandit Running and stuff, is absolutely fantastic brand based in America. Really, like, can't get hold of them here in the UK. So for him to be able to bring those in is a really, really big step for him. And also, of course, they do coffee there. So, I've still yet to actually head to the St. Paul's one. So I want to go down and visit, but I'll definitely be over there for a bit of a gait analysis and maybe a cup of coffee or two.
Well, I wish Jonty and Molly the best of luck. It's really exciting to see and to have watched this grow over time. And I hope it can be something that they can extend into, other places in the world as well. I think that's their aim as well.
Absolutely.
One day.
Yeah. Exciting.
All right, let's close things off then. I think I want to talk just a little bit about our winter plans. Have you got anything planned for this winter? What's your kind of, are you quite seasonal in how
I approach things? Yeah, kind of. It's basically only developed over the last couple of years, but I like to do everything in completely the wrong way around for a lot of people. So people sort of use, for instance, I'm going by running terms here. So people use the winter to prepare for their marathons and they start getting out on the trails and things. And I will do that as well. But I also like to work on my speed, which is predominantly what people do over the summer on a track season. So I like to throw in a couple of like 5K shorter distances, basically up until Christmas, work on getting faster. And that, for me, works for me anyway, gives me a really good foundation and basis to then start marathon training come sort of like the January time. But I love the winter, or I love training during the winter. I'm one of those slightly strange people who quite enjoy sort of the running in the darkness when the streets are quiet and ultimately I can just zone in and focus on me. So that's what I'll be doing in terms of running for the next couple of months. So let's try and get some faster 5K times in there.
Any particular goals or aims for that?
I wouldn't mind. Yeah, I mean, I have a couple of kind of like to get back down to a more acceptable 5K time that's, sort of down in the low 16s basically. So get down towards that again. So that would be an acceptable place to be for me. And yeah, to be honest, but at the same time, if I don't hit it, I'm not gonna be upset about it.
Just want to enjoy that process.
Yeah, exactly. It's enjoying the process every time. Yeah.
Okay.
But there's also probably something else which I might look at doing, but actually it would just be piggybacking off what you're planning on doing as well over the winter. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about what you're looking at doing?
Yeah, this is something I tried last year. I guess it coincided with the turning of the clocks. So just this weekend as we're recording, the clocks changed and we went back an hour and we got an extra hour at time, but we're losing daylight as we go further and further into the winter. So I've had a summer of fun and, been on a cycle adventure, I've done lots of festivals and I've just tried to enjoy my life. in the daylight, but now the darker periods are coming into our lives. I think I found a really great way to find peace with that time and how to spend some evenings, the dark evenings and maybe some dark mornings on my own. And that was to do some writing. And for some reason, I don't know what started it, but I think maybe it was my addiction to streaks. And currently in that running streak, I started a writing streak, and I was writing a book which I had outlined. So I'd spent a lot of time building an outline, and then I was in a position where I was able to write it. And so I spent roughly maybe an hour a day just sitting down with a blank piece of paper, writing 2 pages front and back. And that was my target for the day, every day. Most days I completed it. Some days on weekends, maybe I was a little less, but I gave myself allowance just to, as long as I did something, that was all that mattered. And if it was just 1 page or 2 rather than the 4, then that was all that I could do. But it was remarkable how once I created this space to do that, I could find that flow where I could easily write those 4 pages of paper every single day. It was just enough to do something, but not too much that it took too much time and too much of my energy away. And then I could put that aside and then get on with the rest of my day. So this year, I wanted to reincorporate it, but maybe try and do it for the entire 6 months that the clocks have changed. I like the idea of tying it in with that, because it gives it a bit of a deadline, which is you always need with a creative project. And it gives you that time where you can commit to doing something, but it's not forever. So having that kind of end goal means that I know that I can go back into the summer and then I can enjoy my life again. So summer for fun, winter for work. So I've got some projects, some creative ideas that I want to pursue, and I'm not entirely sure what I will go with over this next 6 months. There's a book idea that I have, and I've done some of the outlining, but I haven't finished the outline yet. And I've got a few film ideas, some of which I've spent too long trying to work on in the past, but haven't yet got the script sorted. And I think I really want to make a push this winter to try to get something actually tangible out on paper. And a lot of my experience with my book writing last winter has given me the confidence to know how I can unlock that from my mind. And it is about just a small bit of consistency every single day and allowing yourself that hour to be completely disconnected with just a blank page. And hopefully you'll have that. If you've got a good outline and you know what you need to write, then that writing can flow for that hour of time. So I want to do that streak. I announced it on my socials yesterday, and of course I announced it without even completing my first day, and it got to 11 o'clock and I still hadn't started it. And I think I've written it down here actually on my paper when I started. At 11:46 I started my first day of writing, and these are my first 2 double-sided pages of paper.
Oh, look at that.
That I wrote. I'm going to be private about all this, but if you want, you're welcome to see this first page. Do you want to see it or read it, or it's, yeah. I'm not sure if I want to talk about what it is, but maybe I will. Do you want to know? Should I tell everyone what this is about?
I kind of want. Well, I feel like you tease people about this right now.
Okay, so the book idea, I'll happily admit. Well, yeah.
Stick the parts that you want to read.
Well, no, I'm not going to read it out. But you're welcome to read it as the first. Let me push it over your way.
Throw it over here.
This is a book idea that that came to me throughout my run streak, and this is why I wanted to get to 1,001 days. This is actually completing this full circle of why I want to get to 1,001 days. Because I want to write a book about my experience during this run streak. I've got 1,001 days of 1,001 runs, all with their own unique stories about how I was and where I was in life at that time and what I did. And within the run streak as well, I've done lots of challenges, and I've done marathons. I've interviewed Sean Conway as a podcast. So many stories within those 1,001 days. So my working title is 1,001 Days of Running, The Art of the Run Streak. And this is my book idea. I don't think it's really healthy to share so much information so early on, but I'm confident enough in my ability of my experience that I've gone through that I feel like it's a worthwhile book to put out there. Also, probably not that many people are going to be listening or watching this to really challenge the fact that someone might copy this idea before I can get it published. So I'm not too worried about that. And I've started with a very rough outline at the moment, which I need to go through because I haven't really outlined the 1001 days. But I've looked into like the past, and as you'll see, I've started on day minus, what day is it?
8,395.
Which is a rough calculation. So I've gone back in time before my run streak to start on what would have been day 0 of me running, to describe what was my first ever run that my dad forced me on. And I think I've done like 3 days worth of running in those 2 pages to describe my first ever run with my dad and the subsequent runs that he took me on. Whether or not that'll make part of the book itself, I'm not sure, but I do like the idea of, it's not just about the 1001 days, that there are other days within this which make up the story of the run streak. So there are other important things that might have happened in my life that have kind of led me to be able to be in this position to do a 1001 run streak. So I can't just talk about those 1001 days. It has to be some things that happened before as well. And of course I can talk about what happened afterwards with, my lack of showers. So that is my idea to write this. I do believe I could probably write this within these 6 months, but I don't do things by halves, and I don't take the easy path in life. And there is other things I want to do creatively in the world of filmmaking. So whilst I believe I can make and write this book in the time, I'm also trying to incorporate another creative project within that, which will be a film idea. Which one, I don't know. But whether that is too much, I don't know. I'm not setting any specific goals. I just want to enjoy the journey and know that consistency and focus will be key.
I'm actually really excited to follow your journey on this, because you sort of mentioned there about the idea of like you'll get into the habit of it and things like that. And I do believe in creating things like that. And I know I have like a quote which I sort of always sort of have on me, and I'm probably going to paraphrase it ever so slightly here, but it's by the great American novelist William Faulkner. And a journalist once asked him, like, when does inspiration strike you? Because obviously at the time, we often talk about the shower moments when you have a moment of epiphany. And he was like, oh, inspiration, that's easy. Inspiration strikes between the hours of 9 to 5 every single day. And effectively he's just there, isn't he, telling you got to create the habit in order to create the space for you to actually, for your creativity and for your mind and your writing to flourish, so that it becomes, like you were talking there, that it would just become easier and that you would be able to formulate your actual story better. And I equally feel like a desire and a pull to do that again, partly because I also used to write quite a lot. I used to do like travel blogs and all this sort of thing. But I also used to just write pen to paper. I think there's something very calming about going analog and just putting a pen to paper. So same as you, I am wanting to do a bit of a writing streak. I won't be doing quite as much as you, but my aim is to be writing a page every single day. And so I feel like I've just found myself with somebody who's sitting opposite me who can actually hold me accountable to such things. And I'll be doing the same to you, mate. But I've got to read your paragraphs first. But I'll be doing the same.
Let me tell you about some of the experiences I had last year with this, where I really surprised myself with how I could find a flow state that could go beyond just these 2 pages. Where let's say a week, like a Sunday evening, when you might want to chill out, put a film on, watch some TV, just zone out. Instead of putting a film on, I went onto YouTube and I'd find these like AI videos, which were like fireplace with like jazz music for like 3 hours, or coffee shop music, put that on the TV. A fireplace was really good because it just kind of helped bring a certain hugger to the kind of vibe of what I was doing. And so I had this kind of background music, this fireplace gone on the TV, and then it was just me left on my own with a piece of paper and a pen. And then I could just find a flow state that I just wouldn't never find in like the summertime, because it was dark and cold outside and I was just in this place where there's not much to do. So why not write? And I can't wait to re-find those moments again where, okay, yes, these 2 double-sided pieces of paper are what I'm aiming to do every day, but I hope that maybe 1 or 2 days of that week, I can do more. And actually pulling some inspiration from The Artist's Way, the book by Julia Cameron, who says, there's 2 things in that book it says that you should always do, is that you should do your morning pages, which is writing 2 pages a day, which is not necessarily actually your writing project, but it's just about writing your thoughts and feelings and who you are, and just like writing, free flowing, like just writing about anything, just getting that out on paper. And actually what I've found, I've been practicing that in the last few months, and I found that's been really kind of very therapeutic to get like some of my things that are in my mind out on paper, and help me also kind of within writing that kind of signpost directions in life that would help, or like analyze things that I wouldn't probably never done if it's just all going out in my mind. But then the second thing she says is you need to have an artist date, which is 1 day of the week you need to set aside for actually doing your art. So go to a coffee shop, go to a museum, a gallery, do something that is artistic.
Got my own coffee shop, mate.
But then actually do the work. So yes, you can do your morning pages, and yes, you can do like an hour a day of writing, but then also, if you can, set that 1 day aside where you do more. And that's what I'm hoping to do going forward. Hopefully we'll have another check-in before the 6 months are over, maybe sometime, maybe in the new year. And you can quiz me on how it's going, and I can say more. I feel confident enough from my experience last year to know that, I mean, I wrote a first pass of an entire book in 3 months. So I'm hoping that the same can happen this time around, and I can hopefully get maybe one of these ideas published in the near future, which is the big aim of mine.
Yeah. Oh, I'm excited.
I suppose let's end things now. I've really enjoyed actually having you here, and it's been a different experience.
Yeah.
I feel like I've had to be on my toes a bit more. I felt like usually in a conversation, I feel like I'm very in control. I've got my outline, I can direct people, and it's all the pressure's on them. But now that it's been a bit more even, and the tide has been turned, and I've had something, the camera and the lights on me for some.
Trying to point it at you, my friend.
I have no idea how I've come across. I can see that you've come across great. Really enjoyed having you here, and that's my vision of you.
Thank you. We'll let the audience be the deciding of. Let the audience be the deciding factor on that. I think, watch them as they all unsubscribe from you, and I'm going to have to work really hard to get them all back on your side. I'm sure
that's not the case. Well, this is also about, we've talked about this a lot, and it's the importance of not relying on putting everything into one thing, and knowing that you can build something over time. And this is just the first episode of the 2 of us, and I hope in a few months' time we can reconnect and come back and have more things to talk about.
Yeah.
That might be a continuation of things we talked about, but also might be other things that are interesting us. And so this is a story which, a bit like my first week of my bike tour, we can't quite yet define what this is and what this means as the bigger picture. This will come over time.
Yeah.
And so it's hard for us to see that both in the now and also for our audience to understand it. But maybe the 10th time that we sit down together, that we will be able to look back and really work out what this is and what this can become.
I think
going forward.
Yeah, because like that bike tour, I'm more than happy to just to come along for the ride on this as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how this develops, really, what happens and where we go.
Yeah, who knows? If you've enjoyed this episode, please do send me or Benny P a message. Tell us what you liked. Tell us what you didn't like, because we're going to be learning as we go, and this has been a learning experience for both of us, and this will hopefully evolve going forward. I'm excited by that, and I'm really pleased to have you on board.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for tuning in. If you want to find out more information about any of the guests, please check out the show notes, where you'll also find links to things mentioned in the conversation. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please take a look through the past recordings. There's so many more incredible stories for you to find, and I can't wait for you to enjoy them. Thank you.